Following the box office failure of Terror of Mechagodzilla, Toho attempted to rejuvenate the Godzilla franchise for nearly a decade. Acknowledging that the series' descent into children's fare had likely alienated older fans, producer Tomoyuki Tanaka decided that it was time for Godzilla to return to the sobering anti-nuclear roots that had made the original film so special, and to do it in a way that felt modern and contemporary. Thus, the series was rebooted, and the mythology of all the previous films was discarded in favor of a direct sequel to the 1954 classic. And so, after 9 long years, Godzilla was given a fresh start, back to terrorize Tokyo in the perfectly titled The Return of Godzilla. Reporter Goro Maki stumbles upon a deserted fishing ship, the Yahata Maru, with the sole survivor claiming to have seen a giant monster emerging from an erupting volcano. Quickly, it becomes apparent that Godzilla is back, and following the sinking of a Soviet nuclear sub, Japan and the major nations of the world scramble to figure out a way to stop him from coming ashore. Soon after, he does exactly this, and as tensions mount as Godzilla makes his way through Tokyo, the survival of Japan and the human race at large is left hanging in the balance. The Return of Godzilla marked a significant milestone for the at the time 30-year-old franchise. Not only did it see the return of Japan's most iconic monster after a long absence, but it was also a return to the tone and themes that had made the original a masterpiece. Stripped of the kid-friendly heroics and nonsensical plots of the later Showa-era films, Godzilla is back to being truly menacing again. This is reflected in the new design, which is big and mean and lacking in any semblance of humanity. He's portrayed more like an animal whose instincts can be used against him, a surprise turn that makes Godzilla more vulnerable than he has ever been despite his increased power. It's a refreshing and realistic take on the character that signaled the drastic change in direction the franchise needed. This change in direction is further reflected in the tone. The Return of Godzilla is arguably an even darker film than the original. An eerie, somber, melancholic atmosphere permeates throughout, and the film isn't afraid to rely on grotesque and ghoulish imagery to set the mood, which is enhanced by a soundtrack that is both beautiful and bombastic. In contrast to the vast majority of the prior films, it tries to be as realistic as possible, showing glimpses into the consequences of Godzilla's existence on everything from international politics to the little people he crushes along the way. This is a complicated way of saying that this film feels epic in a way most of the previous films never did. Like the original, The Return of Godzilla has an explicit anti-nuclear theme. The film isn't afraid to have a thoughtful discussion as to the moral implications of atomic power within the politics of its Cold War era. Some of the most riveting scenes are of the Prime Minister being pressured by the US and the Soviets to use nuclear weapons on Japan, and its conclusion is appropriately subdued and eloquent. Moments such as this are when the film is at its most dramatically potent, and is a stark reminder yet again that Godzilla is at his best when the films are about more than just mindless giant monster action. With that being said, The Return of Godzilla certainly doesn't skimp out on the mayhem and destruction. The film has a nice handful of quality set pieces that wisely don't attempt to merely mimic the original. The Super X in particular proved to be quite a worthy adversary for Godzilla, and their encounters provide for some of the film's most memorable moments. The special effects are leagues better than they had been 10 years prior, and go a long way toward making it feel like a legitimate film as opposed to the cheap rubber-suited antics of many of the earlier entries. For as thematically powerful as The Return of Godzilla is, however, it does suffer from some major blemishes. The film is quite sloppily edited in places, and there are some special effects shots that haven't aged very well. Mostly, though, it suffers from a lack of compelling characters. The 3 young leads, played by Ken Tanaka, Yasuko Sawaguchi, and Shin Takuma respectively, fail to leave a lasting impression, with the love story between Goro and Naoko being particularly trite and uninteresting. Professor Hayashida, played by the almost unrecognizable Yosuke Natsuki, fares much better, voicing much of the film's underlying philosophy. The best character, though, is Prime Minister Mitamura, played brilliantly by Keiju Kobayashi. With few words, he is able to convey the immense pain and frustration of a man forced into an insurmountable situation, providing the film its emotion and heart. The Return of Godzilla is the type of Godzilla movie that only gets made once every generation, reflecting the anxieties and hopes of the time period in which it was made. And while it doesn't quite reach the heights of the original, it is an admirable and much needed return to form for the franchise at the time. It's a fantastic start to a new era of Godzilla films, and in time has become recognized as one of the franchise's best entries. For more reviews and opinions on all things Godzilla, subscribe and stay tuned to Up From the Depths.